3 minutes in the Word, a journey through the Bible. Today, we're talking about 2 Samuel chapter 11. This chapter begins with David sending his men off to war while he stays home at his palace. David, one day, while walking on his roof of the palace, he sees Bathsheba bathing in a nearby residence. David, tempted by sin, he calls his servants and says, Who is this lady? They answer, that's Bathsheba. That's Uriah's wife. Uriah serves in your army. David, continuing with his sin, says, well, have her brought back to the palace. David then sleeps with her. Later on, David finds out that she becomes pregnant with his child. David then sends word to his general, Joab, to have Uriah brought back from the war. David then gets Uriah drunk at the palace and tells him, go back to your wife. Uriah basically says, the rest of my men are out there sleeping under the stars in battle. I can't do this. So he sleeps on the palace steps. David, still trying to cover his sin, sends Uriah back to the army, to the front lines. David further sends messages to Joab, telling him to put him on the front line, and when the battle gets fierce, to pull the rest of the men back. And that's what Joab does. He listens to David instead of seeking another answer, instead of asking God for guidance when someone's telling him to sin. So that's what he did. And Uriah dies. Word gets back to David. David has Bathsheba come to his palace and he marries her. So what lessons can we learn from this? Well, once sin gets started, it's hard to stop it. The deeper the mess, the harder it is to admit the sin. We must always stop sin before it starts. It's like that little snowball rolling down the hill. Once it gets to the bottom, it is just a giant glacier, and it's hard to admit that sin. What other lesson can we learn? The more we sin, the more hardened we become to sin. David openly grieved for Saul and Abner, his enemies. But he didn't grieve at all for Uriah, an innocent man that he had killed to cover his sin. What other lesson? Well, the consequences of sin affect not only us, but others around us, those that we love. This is seen in this story. David's sin, it affected many people. It affected Bathsheba. It affected Uriah because Uriah died. It affected Joab by forcing him to commit sin to try to protect David. Sin, it's far reaching. So what do we do when we're tempted by sin? Well, we got to honestly ask in prayer for God's forgiveness. We can't say these empty prayers asking for forgiveness. We must ask honestly in our deepest of heart for forgiveness. We got to read. We got to memorize. We got to meditate on prayer. And finally, we got to find someone else that we can share our struggles with and that will hold us accountable when we're tempted.